Normal types. If for whatever reason player characters didn't get otherwise unobtainable ultra rare grass, fire and water types forever, they'd almost certainly be given a low base stat total normal type and sent on their way. It makes way more sense that a normal type would be a starter given how common they are. Normal types are the second most common type after water types. Children everywhere are given cats, dogs, rodents, marsupials and other various furred mammals as pets. These are the cornerstone of the normal type roster. It just makes no sense why starter Pokemon aren't normal type. But that's not the point of this video. I wondered, what really is a normal type? In a world of dragons and garbage monsters and inanimate objects kept as pets and routine child abductions by wild animals, what is normal? Normal synonyms include typical, stock, usual, standard, but are we really expected to believe that these Pokemon are the normal ones in this context, compared to everything else? That cannot be, so I'm going to look at what makes normal normal, and what makes everything else not normal. Let's take a look at some stereotypes. Based on what people in the comment section tell me, normal types commonly have two traits: high hit points and access to a wide range of moves beyond just normal types. And at a cursory glance, not a detailed analysis, but a cursory glance, it shows that these are somewhat true. Looking at stage 2 evolutions, we can see that many normal types get access to a wide move pool. Slacking, for example, is able to learn Shadow Claw, Seed Bomb, all the elemental punch moves, Gunk Shot, Thunder and Solar Beam. To use another Gen 3 example, Exploud is able to learn many of the same moves, including elemental punch moves, Solar Beam, Avalanche, Bulldoze and Flamethrower. Snorlax can learn Icy Wind, Zen Headbutt, Crunch, Thunderbolt, Earthquake, Blizzard and Focus Blast. Stoutland can learn Psychic Fans, Stomping Tantrum, Rock Tomb, Surf, Thunder and Shadow Ball. On the base HP front, it mostly holds up. Normal types have an average base HP of 76.6, fifth out of all types. To be honest, I wasn't surprised by this. Yes, some of the biggest HP Pokemon are normal type, including Blissey and Chansey, Snorlax, Slacking and Wigglytuff. However, they are balanced out by every regional normal type start of game rodent and marsupial, and all of the frail normal flying types. So yes, normal types are above average for HP, but still have a very wide spread. On normal type stats, I'd like to note that on average, they are very bad. They rank 5th for average base HP, but 15th for attack, 18th for defense, dead last, 16th for special attack, and 18th for special defense, dead last again, and 8th for speed. So they can absorb a lot of damage and move slightly faster than average, but fail to land a hit or deflect one directed at them. This makes sense given that normal types are overrepresented in the early game, taking up the bulk of early, for lack of a better word, plain Pokemon, there for the player to learn to beat up before moving on. Normal types are the second most common type after water types, with 153 as of Generation 9. I wondered whether there was a generation where normal types peaked and dominated more than usual. There are two ways to look at this: the raw number of normal types in any given generation, and then also weighted against how many Pokemon were introduced in that generation. On the raw basis, Generation 1 wins with 23 normal types, representing 15.23% of all Pokemon in that generation. Pretty dominant for normal types, I think, given that there were 15 types in Generation 1. On a weighted basis, where we look at the proportion of normal types against how many Pokemon were introduced in that generation, Generation 4 comes out on top, with 107 new Pokemon introduced, 17 of those being normal types. I kind of assumed that Generation 1 would still be number 1 here, but I am pleasantly surprised by Generation 4's normal dominance. Generation 4 also takes the crown for the most normal type legendary Pokemon, with 2 to Generation 5's 1 and Generation 9's 1. So we know that Generation 4 was the peak gen for normal types, as we know it was the low point for fire types. I'd like to look at what normal type Pokemon are also really good, and see if we can glean any information from that. Given the relative lack of normal type legendary Pokemon, most of Normal's strongest Pokemon are evolutions of easily obtained early game Pokemon. And this is also where a lot of my favourite Pokemon are, to be honest. Give me a good normal type any day of the week. I love using Ursaring and Slacking and Snorlax and Porygon Z. These Pokemon are sick, and there's just something so fun about bulldozing your opponents with body slams and stab return, or sitting there and walling everything with rest, and then sleep talking return. Almost all of the good normal type mons are either physical attackers or special walls. Special walls like Blissey and Snorlax can be infuriating to play against in certain gens, and physical attackers like Braviary and Kangaskhan can be very threatening. Unfortunately, the ranks of strong normal types aren't that densely populated, and they all have their drawbacks. But generally speaking, I really like using them, and the devs always throw us at least one strong normal type per generation. Having praised normal types a bit here, I'd also like to say that something being normal type is kind of arbitrary. For some types, their typing is really obvious. Fish are really clearly water types, dragons are, well, dragons. Fire types are usually on fire in some way or other. Most normal types are just unmodified versions of animals, and other types can sometimes only be slightly modified versions of those animals. Tauros is a bull and is normal type. Paldean Tauros has 3 slightly different variations, and they're all still just a bull, but now they're fighting type. I actually think this is fine. It is a children's video game after all, but in a lot of cases there just isn't a lot separating a normal dog from a slightly differently coloured and differently typed dog. All of this summary and analysis of normal types has led me to a couple of conclusions, chief of which is that normal types are appropriately named. They're nothing special, but they're not awful either. They really epitomise the saying, "Jack of all trades, master of none." They're not particularly vulnerable, with 1 weakness and 1 immunity, but also unable to deal super effective stab damage with no type advantages. Yet, they can also utilise an incredibly broad range of moves, which gives their movesets an element of unpredictability. Yet again, on average, their stats aren't great, so they can't really utilise those moves to maximum effect, like Pokemon with type advantages and better stats could. Overall, they really are just normal. And I think this is an important niche in the Pokemon balance. It's good that there's a type that can do a bit of everything in a somewhat average way. Having a variety of types and matchups is great, but normal being neutral in most cases is also quite fun sometimes. It's great to use Snorlax and just mash Body Slam against everything that's not Ghost, Rock, or Steel, and it's appropriate that you can't just mash Body Slam against Ghost, Rock, or Steel. I think that normal is especially great as a secondary typing. It makes early game use a lot better before everything else gets strong stab moves, and doesn't typically make Pokemon much weaker since it only adds 1 weakness but also an immunity. For normal flying types, it gives them ghost immunity at the cost of neutral fighting damage, which isn't really a problem. Much as I don't enjoy X and Y, the emphasis in that generation on normal type combinations that didn't previously exist was quite refreshing, and I'm really pleased that the trend has been continued in later gens. I'd really like to see more normal type combinations in future, especially since of the 8 remaining unused type combinations, 4 of them include normal types. Granted, 2 of them are normal rock and normal steel, which would just instantly die to fighting type moves, but still, I would like to see them. That's all I had, folks. Do you have a favourite normal type Pokemon? Do you avoid normal types? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching.